The featured facilitator of the massive open online course, Change, Education, Learning and Technology, for the week of October 31st was Nancy White. Nancy, focusing on the theme Triangulating, Weaving, and Connecting Our Learning, addressed the MOOC Change 11 community 3 times. Twice in Collaborate, formerly Illuminate, and once in DTLT Today. Unlike the previous Change 11 facilitators, Nancy, true to her background, encouraged synchronous participation in her opening presentation. Nancy White, founder of Full Circle Associates, is a skilled and dynamic online facilitator, interaction designer, and coach for online communities, teams, and distributed learning constellations. Nancy is an equally proficient teacher, presenter, and writer of topics encompassing social media, social interaction, and online facilitation. More recently, in 2009, she co-authored Digital Habitats, Stewarding Technologies for Their Communities, with globally known social theorist and authoritarian of communities of practice and their applications to organizations, Etienne Wenger, and with John David Smith, coach and consultant of technology and learning problems faced by communities, their leaders, and their sponsors. Nancy presented several themes to her elected topic. 3 of the topics which stood out as weaving common threads throughout her 3 online discussions were change, the social artist, and social artistry. There was so much packed into Nancy's presentations that I had to revisit the session recordings, the whiteboard interactions, and the chats several times to process all the information. As a completely and immersed active participant in her first session, I was left overwhelmed at the end of the hour and pondering what had just taken place. In many ways, I was being forced to stretch my mind and to multitask between listening to what Nancy was saying, responding to her questions and invitations to participate on the whiteboard, reading the chats, and responding back to the ensuing chat discussions. In her second session, I resumed my habitual role of listener and chat participant while researching new or interesting concepts and links that were being mentioned in passing. For Nancy's third and final presentation, I decided to try graphic note-taking, as was mentioned in Nancy's previous session, while following and responding to the chat. Over the next few minutes, I will attempt to unpack those sessions and provide you with an overview of the central and recurring points that were raised both within the context of the synchronous sessions and from the comments of fellow members of the Change 11 community. I will also introduce you to 3 people who I personally know who are social artists. For some people, the very notion of change conjures up feelings of discomfort, uneasiness, fear, and even trepidation. For others, it evokes feelings of excitement, thrill, adventure, and relief. There is no denying that change is happening all around us. Every nanosecond of every day, something changes that affects us in some way, shape, or form. Changes in climate, in economics, or in business, for example, vastly alters how we react to or process what we eat, who we spend time with, or how we work. In the case of Change 11, we have been challenged each week to examine directly or indirectly how current trends, emerging technologies, and ongoing research affects how we view ourselves as both learners and educational practitioners. Although previously an urban myth, scientists set out to prove that in a world of more than 6 billion people, everyone on the planet is connected in just a few steps. This phenomenon, known as 6 degrees of separation, has recently been readjusted because of the social networks to a mere 3.73 degrees of separation in a world of just over 7 billion people. Network science is changing the way we think of the world. We are more than ever connected to one another, and the changes that take place halfway around the world both deeply impact us and have consequences on how we deal with one another. We become more conscious of what is happening, the knowing, and feeling compelled to react or to share. Nancy invited those present in the synchronous discussion to visually depict how we feel when things change around us. There was a mix of emotions portrayed, from positive feelings and receptiveness to sheer terror. Although we may be positively receptive and interested in change when it occurs within us, when change is externally driven, we become less receptive and less enthused. The challenge is to find that sweet spot, that place where we are most comfortable when we are in the midst of such change all around us because of the diversity of the traversal environments or tools such as Twitter and Facebook in which we engage. We constantly work with attention when it comes to change. Change is neither a pain nor a pleasure, but rather it is about finding a place that uses both pain and pleasure for our learning, productivity, and openness. Nor is change good or bad. It is a matter of balancing that tension that allows us to be productive. In further interactions, the collective contributions in response to Nancy's question of who makes change useful or productive for us in the context of learning, it included the self, people with good ideas, and those willing to share. In response to the question of who makes change a pain in the context of learning, the responses demonstrated once again that tension exists when it comes to who makes change uncomfortable, and it even leads to ambiguity. The role of the traversal, the individual can work in a top to bottom, left to right fashion, becomes very important to making change positive and productive through empathy and diplomacy, but not through facilitation. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Msimbi Kanyero, a social artist who is a very good friend of mine. I had the privilege to work alongside Msimbi at a UN-partnered organization in Geneva, Switzerland. We first met in Hong Kong at an international assembly, and we now look forward to the possibility of working together once again.
Economic self-reliance enables people to make choices. This in itself is empowering. For women to benefit from economic independence, they must have access to property, land ownership, and skills. Women also need to access funding and credit in order for them to make progress in business and entrepreneurship. Case in point, women have proven their credibility. They are by far the most responsible borrowers, consistently paying back their loans. Economic independence for women is extremely important in the fight against HIV and AIDS because, among other things, it gives women the confidence to make choices, including to negotiate safer sex.
There was much quandary in defining, but foremost in grasping, the definition of a social artist. In part, this may be attributed to the fact that several participants voiced that social artist was a term that they had never previously heard of. The two definitions that Nancy alluded to are from the works of Etienne Wenger and of Jane Houston. Etienne, speaking at the Powering a New Future conference in Lisbon in 2008 and blogged about by David Wilcox, spoke of the social artist as a person who helps to create social learning spaces. Social artists create a space where people feel listened to, where they feel heard, and where they are invited into a conversation. Social artists notice the world in a particular way and to act upon it by engaging with the world around them. Jane Houston, scholar, philosopher, and researcher in human capacities, provides a slightly different perspective to the definition of a social artist. Social artists, she says, learns to think like a planetary citizen, to appreciate cultures and cultural stories and myths while searching for the emergence of a new story, a new myth, to offer new models and paradigms of organization, to exhibit the joy of being a lifelong learner, to bring laughter and delight to learning and change, to serve as a healer of people and societies, to balance his or her life so that contemplation and meditation informs each action, and so that inward life and outward expression are complementary, a worldwide network of individuals and institutions quickened by the desire to create a new social paradigm in which humanity and the earth are each enhanced within the context of collective destiny. Social artists are part of the ecosystem. In creating a space between people, they also act as a transversal in that they connect other aspects such as play and learning with the larger ecosystem. The transversal weaves the various actors to connect them to one another. In its simplest form, the social artist connects people. They help people to be heard and listened to and help them to be present within the larger ecosystem by probing, asking questions, and demonstrating that they are not only hearing them, but they are also listening to them. Now let's listen to Nancy as she talks with Susie during the 2010 Community Matters Conference and see how she acts as a social artist by affirming, probing, and validating Susie.
But I also think you have some higher purpose in you, not just, well, I'm in Denver today.
Right. I mean, on some days that's good, but on certain days, like a couple days ago, I learned so much about storytelling, and I know so many people in so many places that actually, well, they don't always have time to go online and learn about different things, but they seem to be interested in what I've been learning. So it may not be possible to share with them a huge amount, but just a small amount, just so that they maybe might find a great website that they can go to when they have time.
So this is why people are the center part of this social media, not the tool. is when somebody who's good at connecting ideas from one person to another, or thinking, oh, I think Susie would be interested in that, or oh, I think Anjan would be interested in that. And it's that people thinking about other people that makes this magic. But it's what's the other part about this magic is you can reach people who you didn't know you needed to reach, or you didn't know wanted to reach you. So it ripples out, like throwing that pebble in the pond, or a handful of little pebbles, and all the ripples go places you don't expect. And that's what's magical about it.
Well, that's cool.
A social artist welcomes people. They use their brushstrokes to create an open environment for learning. They're good listeners, and they know how to practice the art of silence. It is my joy to introduce you to another social artist, my good friend and mentor, Moira Brown. Our paths crossed in an uncommon way, but our friendship has never stopped growing and deepening. Moira has been and continues to be a mentor who habitually encourages, affirms, and connects me with the right people I need to meet at just the right time and place.
Nothing about Nick Vujicic projects weakness, despite the fact that he was born without arms or legs. He's a hard man to catch up with. In fact, we've been trying to get him here for 8 years. He was living in Australia, where he was born, but he comes to us now from California. And the founder and president of Life Without Limbs probably has just come from some other country. I mean, you're a hard man to pin down. 3.5 million people in 31 countries have met you, at least heard you. I don't know if they've been able to get up close and personal.
Right.
But you are so personal when you talk to people, so vulnerable, and so willing to go anywhere.
God's good.
This message. Now, some are seeing you for the first time.
Right.
And it's a shocker. We don't meet people very often who look like you. And we all want to know what happened.
Social artistry is akin to the metaphor of a host. The host welcomes people, introduces people to each other, and ignites interesting conversations without saying very much so that others can engage in conversations amongst themselves. Whereas Etienne refers to social artistry in the context of practice and learning, the Social Artistry Institute looks at social artistry more on a societal basis, where the focus is on how we function as a society. Open online courses provide a unique environment where practices deviate from the traditional focus and intellectually intended activities. Social artistry is not merely about having stimulating conversations. It is about how we stimulate each other and how we demonstrate that we are really listening by not all speaking simultaneously. Another way to look at social artistry is that it is not about somebody, but rather it's about a set of practices. Being heard is very significant to learning, to doing, and to being together. As Nancy stresses, being heard in online spaces is sometimes quite mysterious because it means having to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And that's all about empathy. Social artistry matters in our learning and our everyday being. It is about noticing the gaps that exist and bringing the people in. It is about engaging people and not forcing them in. We can engage people with very small actions. Reciprocity is very important to social artistry, in that we may not be doing something, but someone else is, and that action rubs off on us. We may not be practicing social artistry at that moment, but that which has rubbed off on us, we carry it forward and use it at a later time, at which time we will engage someone else. A point in case, during the DTLT Today session, Julia Forsyth brought up graphic note-taking, and as a result, I decided to try to see how it would help me in my learning. What I observed is that the exercise of graphic note-taking helped me focus and listen better to the conversations and retain the session longer. It appealed to me as a visual learner. Social artistry is a skill that we can all bring into our lives. It is all about the back channels, the private messages, the emails, responding to blogs and tweets, and it is about the Skype conversations. Back channels are very important, and it is the little things that we do, the building blocks of the other things, that really matters. The last person that I would like to introduce you to is Jean Vanier, a person who I really believe is a social artist. I've known of Jean since I was in high school, but I only had the pleasure of finally meeting him face-to-face at a conference when I was appointed to work with him. Our paths crossed many more times since our first encounter.
Everything takes time and everything is built on freedom. We can only love freely. And a freedom which brings people, help them to stand up. A love that liberates and not a love that controls or possesses. Free and to sense that we can together, we have a mission and a meaning to our lives. And that mission, the greatest reality of a human being, is to give life, to transmit life, to help people to rise up in freedom, to make choices, to discover their desire. A desire becomes a choice, and a choice a project, that they can rise up to give life and receive life. See, the big thing of we human beings, and I think that is what we're discovering in L'Arche.
Although there were no prescribed readings for the week, I found that I wrestled much more with Nancy's topic of triangulating, weaving, and connecting our learning than I did with any of the other weeks. I left with many more questions than I found answers to, and I continue to carry on back-channel conversations with Nancy on various topics, including exploring the concept of strategically placed social artists in MOOC environments, or if it is more important to encourage the emergence of social artists. There are no right or wrong answers. It is just a matter of which angle we look at it. The one question I open up to you is, according to the Athabasca course calendar, MDDE 660 will be offered again in January. Athabasca University students will be jumping into Change 11 in the middle of it, after networks have already been established. Would social artists be of benefit to them during the initial adjustment and adaptation?